Friday night, September 20th, 2019, the last Friday of summer. 2 more days to go. Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show as we wind down what was, in general, I think, a rather good summer. We had a lot of days where the weather was good, a lot of weekends where the weather was very good. We had our fair share of thunderstorms, at least in my area we did. At times we had some severe weather, a few tornadoes in the mix too, which is something you don't want to see. We did okay. Certainly, I think there was a little more variability, and we had breaks that came from time to time during the month of July and even during the month of August. We also stagnated at times. We had a fair share of 90-degree days, but it wasn't outrageous, and it never seemed to get too hot or too humid for too long. And here we are after, I think, probably the best week, certainly the last 4 days. Monday not so much because there were clouds around, but the last 4 days have been just spectacular, really. And I had 2 mornings in a row where I woke up to temperatures down in the 40s, which was, really nice. 43 this morning at my house. So needless to say, I was wrapped up under the comforter this morning, and it felt good. And now we're headed into the weekend, and of course, we're going to warm up. Let me just point out, because seasons don't flip, they don't flip switches, and suddenly it's autumn cool weather until further notice. Nature doesn't work that way. Weather doesn't work that way. Spring doesn't just instantaneously start on the first day. Neither does summer. Seasons bleed over to each other. You get stretches of warm days into the early fall, especially, and you also get in the summertime. You'll see your first 90-degree days long before the first day of summer. So I don't know how this notion that switches are flipped and seasons are just turned on and off automatically. It just doesn't work that way. So I think it's fair to say, in terms of looking at the overall pattern, that this autumn is going to probably be perhaps a bit more typical of autumns. Cooler air masses we just saw. We'll probably see some more before too long. That doesn't mean it can't get warm. It doesn't mean it can't get very warm for a couple of days. We're going to do that this weekend. We may even do it again next weekend in the eastern part of the United States. But we are going to see a pattern, I think, down the road in the longer term where weather systems are going to be moving along, fronts are going to be coming through on a regular basis, and these warm-ups are going to be short-lived. Certainly not going to see what we saw last September, if you remember, in my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. We had a rather long stretch of very high humidity with dew points into the 70s, even into early October, which is almost unheard of. Thankfully, we're not seeing anything like that, because I can remember that air being just, it actually to me felt worse than it does in those very humid days that you get in August. And I think maybe because the temperature dew point spread was tighter. It wasn't as if we had dew points at 70 and temperatures at 94 or 5, which is miserable enough. But you have dew points at around 72 or 3 and a temperature of 83, 84. It's as if the air just suffocates you. Well, we're not getting that. This weekend is going to be great. It's a beach weekend for those of you on the Long Island shorelines, the New Jersey shore, the Delaware shore, the Maryland eastern shore, on down into Virginia, North Carolina. Definitely beach weather here. For those of you that at least are up from, say, Delaware to southern New England, probably going to see still some leftover high surf and some rip current issues. So if you are headed to the beaches, just exercise some caution. And also, this is a time of year where lifeguards are not on all the beaches. They might be on state parks, but they might not necessarily be on town parks. So you may want to double check about that. If you're going to swim, because the water is still pretty warm, you want to do it safely. Okay, so we've got a number of things happening right now. None of them are really that pressing with regards to tropical storms and hurricanes, but we do have Jerry It's north of the Leeward Islands, going to be having some issues with that in terms of strength and where it may wind up going. Bermuda may get another pass at a hurricane just a week after Umberto went by. And also, we have an interesting hurricane in the Pacific. I haven't really been paying too much attention to that, what's been going on in the Pacific. We've had 3 named storms on the Pacific side, and we also at one point had 3 named storms on the Atlantic side for a total of 6. And that apparently was the most we've ever seen in the Atlantic and Pacific basin combined. Was 6, 3 on one, 3 on the other. I think it's unusual that we've got the 3 on the Pacific side with the 3 on the Atlantic side, because oftentimes when the Atlantic is busy, in cases where we've had 3 or 4 storms running around at the same time, the Pacific is usually pretty quiet, or maybe you have either no storms or perhaps at most you have 1. This is a little odd because of the fact that you had 3 on one side and 3 on the other. I'm not sure whether that has to do with the fact that, I don't know, is it because there's a neutral El Nino that is causing that helps to cause that to happen? I'm not sure. I kind of shrug my shoulders on that and just say I don't know. But it'll be interesting. The folks that are really into that sort of stuff might like to break it down to see why exactly did that occur. So on the Pacific side, we have Hurricane Lorena. And it's not often that when you read a Hurricane Center discussion on the short range where they use the phrase highly uncertain, but they have been dealing with a sudden shift to the east with Lorena, and also that it has formed an eye and it's a hurricane in the Gulf of California. And there are possibilities here where if we see a little bit more of an eastward shift, which is what they in their discussion described in some of the global models showing that you could wind up seeing Lorena running up the Gulf of California, which is very narrow, but it's wide enough to not only sustain it, but the water's pretty warm in there. So it could even strengthen as it moves northwestward if it winds up being offshore. Right now they're looking at it moving along the spine of Baja California on the eastern side, which would argue for slow weakening on the way up with the interaction with the high terrain there. So very interesting situation developing in Baja California. And of course, if it's moving all the way up, you got to wonder whether that moisture is going to eventually get up into California, Southern California, and into maybe into Arizona, depending on what the upper air looks like. And we do have WPC's forecast, which, by the way, does show some fairly substantial rains into Arizona. Now, how much of that did they weave Lorena into their equation? I don't know, but they're certainly showing up to 2 or 2.5 inches there. And then you have a stripe of heavy rains running across Texas in through the Central Plains and on up through the middle and parts of the upper Mississippi Valley to the lower lakes, where we've got that patch of 5 inches or more. Now, that's Imelda related. The remnant circulation of Imelda has pushed up in further north. There's still some trailing rains down in East Texas, but they are banded in nature. They're not. They're just these narrow north-south bands that have been coming in off the Gulf of Mexico. Not really like we saw yesterday. And when we see the latest radar, you'll notice that there's not the radar activity. Isn't anything special. Certainly not that mess that we saw, that huge area of training thunderstorms that happened for much of the day yesterday in southeast Texas. Up to 40 inches or more of rain reported in some places. Just phenomenal. Dry in the southeast. Dry over most of Florida except the extreme southeast. Mainly dry in the northeast except up in Maine. And you can see the rainfall amounts over the next 7 days, 1/4 to 1/10 of an inch or less. And then you've got some scattered heavier precip in parts of the Dakotas, North Dakota in particular, up into northwest Minnesota, and kind of arcing back through Montana, bleeding down into parts of western Wyoming, eastern Idaho, and also down the coast of the Pacific Northwest into northern California. We'll see how that all plays out over time. And very quickly tonight, with regards to anything outstanding with respect to watches and warnings, we do have flood watches and flash flood watches up from Kansas up through northwestern Illinois, and also still in southeastern Texas. It's not going to take much. You get a little cluster of thunderstorms to move overhead, and you got instant flash flooding with all the rain that's already fallen. Severe thunderstorm watches this evening as of 7:12, running down through the central Dakotas into northwest Nebraska. And we actually have, I think those might be, could they be? Is it possible? Is it for real? Is it safe? A Marathon Man reference, Dustin Hoffman, Laurence Olivier movie. What do we have here? In northwestern Wyoming, we have a freeze warning and, oh no, that's a winter weather advisory that we have up for West Yellowstone and some other areas in Wyoming. And also we have a winter storm warning in that little pink area, which is on the Montana side, I believe. Yes, indeed. That in Red Lodge on one side, and Bozeman, which is in the winter weather advisory, is on the other side. So they're going to get some snow there, and we're going to have a little bit of fun too. I'm just noticing it now. They are forecasting snow-wise 12 to 18 inches above 8,000 feet. Okay, so I think this may be the first winter storm warning of the season. So snow lovers, pay attention tonight. We're gonna have a little fun because I got some snow maps ready too, so you're gonna like that. Okay, so let's run to the satellite. We'll go to the U.S. loop first, and then we'll switch off and we'll get into everything that's happening. So you can see on the lower left, Lorena. You can't really see it on this shot, but they did mention on the discussion that an eye had formed there on their latest discussion, which I think only came out a little over an hour ago. We also see some thunderstorms there moving up through the southern and central plains into the middle Mississippi Valley. In the east, from Maine down to Georgia and into Alabama, it's bone dry, and it was a beautiful day, and it looks like we have a nice calm night ahead. Off the East Coast, there's an upper low. This was responsible for helping to turn Umberto to the northeast and dragging it away from Bermuda and keeping it well offshore and well to the east of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. That upper low is beginning to move a little bit to the east, but you'll notice the clouds to the south are blowing pretty much from the west-southwest to the east-northeast in the upper atmosphere, and you're getting all those cloud tops being blown there, coming from the Caribbean on up through the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and west of Puerto Rico, so the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and into western Cuba, and moving to the northeast. That is the environment that Jerry is heading into, and that is going to create some issues with regards to shear. So I think it's going to impact the strength of Jerry over the weekend. Early next week, if it survives all of that, we may see those upper air winds relax, and with an upper trough swinging in the east, you may see this strengthen again. Forecast to make a right turn to the north and northeast, and that might be Bermuda bound, although there is some variation in terms of the models as to how if it's going to go over north or possibly even past southeast of Bermuda, depending on what the upper flow does. So something we're going to be watching that, of course. And you see the moisture that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. It's as if the upper atmosphere is really beginning to rev up for some kind of change. And I think what you're going to be seeing over the next couple of weeks is a slow process of moving the pattern around a little bit. We've been talking about the trough coming into the eastern part of the United States. It seems like that's going to be delayed a little bit, but I think eventually it does get there. So here's the radar tonight, and I want to go back to where we were talking about Imelda yesterday. You can see the thunderstorms in southeast Texas. Nothing like what we saw yesterday, but you still have some bands there to deal with. And then you see the heavier storms that are up through parts of Oklahoma, right along the Texas border, and then back over into parts of West Texas. And further north, seeing some heavy thunderstorms in southeast Missouri moving into southern Illinois. Also going out to the west in that other severe thunderstorm watch. You can see those strong storms moving through North Dakota right now with some other scattered storms in northern South Dakota and southeast Wyoming. And then you've got this precip that is arcing back in Montana and on over into parts of southeastern Idaho. The west right now is quiet in Washington and Oregon down into California. Same holds for Arizona, and unfortunately we don't get a radar shot of what's down there and over the southern tip of Baja with Lorena, and the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, the southeast down to Florida. You could hardly find a shower, let alone a thunderstorm. It's a very inactive radar for sure in the east, and that's kind of how it's been really most of this week. Okay, so let's jump. Let's look at the tropics. Let's look at Jerry on the latest loop, and it started looking very ragged early this morning into this afternoon. We've seen a recent burst of thunderstorm activity here and on the north and west of the center. So at the very least, they're kind of maintaining the intensity. And there's on the enhancement. I'm going to see if I can get the color image on here. There we go. This shows up better. So you can see that big blow up that occurs late this afternoon and this evening, and it's occurring north and west of the center. The eye has completely disappeared, obviously, but this increase in thunderstorm activity for now allows it to at least hold its intensity. Some heavy rains are getting into the northern Leeward Islands from this, although with this recent blow up, it looks like the southern end of that has thinned out. There's a bit of it looks a bit more circular at this stage of the game, and there's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that's on its way to investigate. I'll check in a little while to see what the progress of that is. And here's the Hurricane Center's official forecast on the 5 o'clock advisory at 19.6, 62.0 west, and it's northwest of the islands of St. Martin, St. Bartholomew, St. Eustatius, where we still have tropical storm watches up for those islands, but they really are escaping any of the winds with this, getting some of the rains and maybe some heavier showers, but they are really escaping true tropical storm conditions. The Hurricane Center weakens this to a tropical storm tomorrow into Sunday morning, and then starts to strengthen it back to a hurricane as we move into Monday and Tuesday. Makes that arc to the right to a path. If you connected the dots, it would go right over Bermuda. Checking the uncertainty cone, it has gotten wider because the spread in the model guidance has gotten wider as well, and we'll review some of that in a bit as well. So here's a wide view of the Atlantic, and I want to point out a couple of things here. So first of all, before I do that, I'm just going to very quickly come back to the dashboard here. I assume I don't see anybody saying I have any sound problems, and you're seeing the map, which is a good thing. And the autumnal equinox is on Monday. I think it comes in a little after 4 a.m. Eastern time. So I saw someone on the chat, and then I lost the comment talking about the autumnal equinox. So that's the timing on that. Okay, you guys are looking good. Everything is safe. You can hear everything I'm saying. So that's a good thing. All right, so here's the eastern satellite view. And there's a few things of note. First off, we have those strong winds that I mentioned here, and you can see them. They're coming in from off the Caribbean and moving on up southwest to northeast. It's off this view, but there is an upper low that, in fact, if you look on the upper left of the Atlantic there, off the Delmarva Peninsula and the Carolina coast, you see those clouds are moving pretty much north to south. So you've got an upper low that's sitting out here, and that is moving to the east, but it's creating this long fetch of southwesterly winds and in the upper atmosphere, and you've got wind shear. Here's Jerry doing its best to blow up some thunderstorms, and at least for a little while longer, it is outside that zone of shear. There's some shear going on here, but it won't be long before it's going to get into these upper air southwest winds, and that's going to impact the storm. And don't be shocked if it winds up weakening to a tropical storm. And don't be shocked if the actual center of circulation winds up getting exposed at some point because of all that shear. I would be shocked if it didn't happen that way. Now, downstream from Jerry is a tropical wave. The Hurricane Center did mention this this afternoon. There's a tropical wave that is moving westward toward the Windward Islands, and it is shown an increase in thunderstorms. They kind of raised the chance of this developing a little bit by about 40% as it tracks fairly quickly, probably going to be going into the Eastern Caribbean. There were attempts of models to develop a low-pressure center when it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, but it didn't really do anything with it. So I'm just kind of skeptical here with what's going on aloft as to whether there would be any room for something to develop out of this, at least initially. An argument can be made that eventually, if Jerry, when it gets far enough north, that you might see the upper air winds become more conducive and pull this thing up to the northwest over time. So we'll see if that happens. And in the meantime, take a look on the lower right. That is coming off the African coast. This is a big wave. It's a well-developed low that is moving off the African coast. And models very quickly develop this into a tropical depression early next week on Monday, and into a tropical storm shortly after that. And both the GFS and the European have this becoming a hurricane, which is something that those models have been doing for days now. So definitely going to keep an eye on that. You'll notice too, let me just clean this up a little bit on the loop. These clouds there's some kind of big upper low sitting out here in the Atlantic at the high levels of the atmosphere, because those clouds are moving counterclockwise, and there's a trough that drops down almost to about 20 degrees north. So there's a weakness here in the central Atlantic that we'll have to pay attention to, because what could wind up happening is, why does this keep coming back on me? All right, we'll do it this way. We'll get rid of it and bring it back, and that'll clean it up. This wave is possibly will respond to a weakness and wind up recurving out in the Atlantic someplace long before it gets anywhere close to the Leeward Islands. At least that has been a consistent view of models over the last couple of days. And judging from what you see on the satellite, you can kind of understand why, because of the fact that, at least for now, there's a very deep trough that is present there that dominates much of the south central and southeastern part of the Atlantic Ocean. A lot of fun out here. So let's look at Lorena, and this is the Hurricane Center's forecast of Hurricane Lorena. Top winds are 85 miles an hour. It's at 23.2, 109.3 west. It's just off the southern tip of Baja California, and it's a hurricane, and the Hurricane Center brings it inland. And you can see on this recent forecast, the prior forecast was to the west, along the west coast. Now they suddenly have had to shift it to the east, and they drag it just inland of the coast as a tropical storm all the way up, and then they weaken it to a depression. But in their discussion, they talked about the fact that the global models seem to be pushing this further east, that we could wind up with a track up the Gulf of California. So that's why they put these tropical storm watches up for the Mexican coast on the east side of the Gulf of California. So I'm going to watch this. I'm going to watch to see how this plays, because this fascinates me. And here's the loop on the Pacific side, and you can see the three named storms that are on here. You have Mario, which is very, very close. It's a tropical storm. This is Mario right here. And I'll bring this guy down here so we can see that better. There's Lorena right in there. This is Kiko, which is a tropical storm, and it's been kind of it's been tracking up to the north and then the southwest, and it's sort of doing, taking a very weird track here. So it's holding its strength at 50 miles an hour, but it's forecast to weaken or at best hold its own over the next 48 to 72 hours. Out to the west of there, you'll notice all these clouds. Guess what? Deep trough right in here, blowing all those clouds away to the northeast. So there's some kind of upper low that's sitting out here. At some point, this one's going to may wind up getting involved with some of those upper air winds, and that between that and the colder water, it will go away in time. I'll see if there's a storm. Do we have a storm shot on the Pacific? I'll take a look. Jerry, all available storm views. Let's see. Okay, all I'm seeing here is Jerry. Okay, back to the West Pacific. Let's see if we can get a tighter shot. They don't always give you the best shots here. That's too far southeast, so we can't really see much with that. And Pacific Coast. This may not go far enough south, but we'll give it a try. Yeah, see, this one even doesn't go far enough south. If you look on this, you're not even within range. This, it seems lately like every time when I'm looking at something, I'm trying to find it's lying in between sectors. And you can't. I don't think the Pacific Southwest is going to go down that far. Nope, it doesn't. So it's not. I don't have a shot that's really far enough, tight enough to the south to help us out here. The tropical Pacific I've already shown. So okay, so we'll just have to give it up on that. So Lorena is going to be something that we are going to watch. Okay, you ready, snow lovers? Just for you. Okay, I did this just for you. This is over Asia and Siberia over the next 10 days, going into the beginning of October. It looks like a rather robust early snowfalls that are going to be occurring there from east to west. In fact, some rather robust snowfalls going on pretty far west into westernmost Russia and parts of Eastern Europe, northeastern Europe, which is rather interesting. It's early. Scott Briller mentioned to me earlier that there was a tweet from Judah Cohen about this, getting a bit of an early start. I will just tell you right off the bat, I'm just showing this to have a little fun here. I wouldn't put any kind of meaning into any of this at this point. And since we have it going, you can see the growth here on the North America side. And I'll run it back so we can have the drama, because it's very important that we have drama. So here we are. And you can see the growth of the snow cover over the next 16 days. Use this with a big grain of salt. But you do have some indication of some snows, some heavier snows building down into the Rockies, on up into northeastern Canada over Labrador, northern Canada over the frozen Arctic sea ice and back through Greenland and back through Alaska. And then when you jump over to the other side to easternmost Russia. So again, we're not literally going to look at. We're not going to look at this literally. But the places that are supposed to get, if they're places that are, if they were going to get snow early, they seem to be on the road to getting that. Whether that has any longer term meaning or not, I would say, as I said just a little while ago, don't bank on it. Okay, so let's take a look at where we're going, upper air patterns and everything else, and what it means with regards to Jerry. This is the GFS. The 18Z GFS is now coming in pieces. So being that it's in pieces, we're not going to use it. We'll use the 12Z run, and we'll follow it along. And I've got the Atlantic view. And this is back to Tuesday, so you can clearly see Umberto. You can see the system that became Jerry moving west-northwest. Umberto, of course, is long gone as a post-tropical cyclone passing southeast of Newfoundland. And then you have Jerry, which goes north of the Leeward Islands. This is the present time, running up to the northwest. Notice the pressure is not very low, 1,003 millibars. So there seems to be some model weakening here. You can also see that a low forms east of Trinidad, Tobago there, from that area of disturbed weather that's east of the windwards right now. And that low appears, disappears, and reappears. Jerry, meanwhile, is getting ready to make the turn and moves up toward Bermuda. And now, of course, if you look on the toward the lower right, you can see that 994 low. That's the system that comes off the African coast and quickly develops a circulation when it's south of the Cabo Verde Islands, and then moves along and starts to strengthen. As we go through time, it gets a little weird. The GFS was a little weird with what was Jerry, because it looks like some kind of low spawns out for some reason to the northeast, and a low gets left behind. And then you've got this other system that comes off the African coast, and it barely makes it to about 50 degrees west before it's already turning to the north and moving rapidly to the northeast. And on day 12 and 13 goes slamming into Ireland and Scotland. Again, huge grain of salt here, folks. We don't look at these things literally at this stage of the game when we go into beyond the fifth or sixth day. But the upper air pattern certainly would suggest, and given what we're seeing on the satellites, what we showed you earlier, that troughing that's out in the Atlantic, and indeed, when we look at the upper air, here's the problem. So you've got this upper low that is sitting right now and beginning to move eastward, and we showed you that on the satellite. There's a trough that's out here, out in the Atlantic. Right there's your trough. Here's your upper high. And, of course, here's Jerry right in there. And you also have an upper low that is sitting well north of the Azores, east of Ireland. West of Ireland. And that trough driving southward. The ridge here, there's a upper high that's in the Gulf states. And that high kind of extends out to just off the Carolina coast. So you've got a big weakness in between, and that's where Jerry is going to go. It's going to go into that weakness between the two upper highs and make that turn to the north and northeast. But while those upper air winds are strong in the higher levels of the atmosphere, above the 500 millibar level, above 18,000 feet, we're going to have that wind shear issue for a while. And then this trough continues to extend southward pretty far down east of Bermuda. And we're at Sunday, so there's quite an influence here of this particular feature. It pulls away, but look what happens across the eastern U.S. You've got another shortwave trough coming out of the Great Lakes and into the northeast on Monday, and that's with the cold front that's going to be coming through. So Jerry is going to respond to this and make that turn and try to go northeastward. Now, what the GFS does is it never really completely picks it up, because that shortwave, this shortwave here that's moving off the coast of New England, weakens as it lifts up into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So it kind of leaves some troughing behind, but it's not a deep powerhouse trough with a strong southwest flow to take this system and accelerate it out to the northeast. So there's a little bit of uncertainty with this. With respect to what's going to happen. Meanwhile, we do have a strong upper low in Canada that's bringing those upper air westerlies down into the United States, into at least the eastern half of the United States. It doesn't go all the way down, but it does at least get into the plains and Great Lakes as we move into the latter part of next week, only to have another ridge build next weekend. And, of course, now when you look at the Atlantic, that feature winds up into a strong upper air system just east of Newfoundland, and you've got this, that's the flow across the Atlantic. And here is your other system coming off the African coast, upper high here, weak high to the northwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, weakness in the middle. So that's going to try to respond to that weakness and cause that system coming off the African coast in the next day or two to eventually make the turn. And the GFS argues that this upper low near Newfoundland drops down, picks it up, and then shoots it up to the northeast to near the Azores, and then eventually taking it over toward Europe. Notice on the U.S. side what happens. You get a deep trough that comes into the east along about a week from, so now this is Friday, October 3rd. So we're talking 2 weeks from now, if that's the case, and followed by another short wave that's swinging out of Canada with a deep trough swinging into the eastern part of the United States. It seems as if that we're going in this direction. The model's been sending a lot of signals, and some of the long range models have been sending this sort of signal for a little while now. So you got to think that there's some value here. Meanwhile, I just don't want to leave the folks out west. We can watch these troughs coming into the west, and it's this particular trough that's dropped in right here. This is our cause for celebration for some early snows in Yellowstone, right in there, that upper low. You've got a bridge in the east. The trough is down the Rockies and into the west, and a ridge that's off the west coast, and a trough that's well off the east coast. And it looks like there's some regularity here because you've got another system coming in into the west, and then yet another deep trough late next week, a rather deep one that drops down into Idaho and Nevada, Utah. So we'll probably get some action out of this in the west. How far east that's going to extend, I don't know. You have a big upper high that builds here in the east. Deep low, deep trough, strong ridge up in the Gulf of Alaska for a week from now, and then that all eventually somehow resolves itself to swinging a trough into the east, and it's going to be a case of slow progress. One trough comes out and then swings in, and then another trough will swing around. Well, this kind of looks to me like it's a pattern that'll settle in and might hold for a little bit. This would be a rather chilly type of setup with a deep trough like this in the east, if it's real. And that's the big question, of course, once you go out past day 8 or 9, is how much value do you take in the model being exactly correct on this? My response to that is you take very little value. I don't think you're going to see it look exactly like this, but it might have the general idea correct, and that'll be that I think we might start to have a little more confidence in if we see this do it through the weekend and into early next week. All right, don't have a lot of the new GFS, as I said. What we do have, at least we can see. Now here's Lorena. Okay, you can see Lorena there on the lower left, and the GFS actually takes it into the Gulf of California, and then it pulls Mario up. That might be something that happens here. Those systems are very close together. They're less than 600 miles apart, and the impact of Lorena and the trough that's going to extend southward it's quite possible that you may see Mario get pulled northward, and it'll gradually weaken as it does so, as it tries to head into Baja California. But it does take this into the Gulf of California there for a little while, leaving it as a hurricane and then bringing it onto the coast of Mexico along about Sunday morning before all that moisture just kind of gets lost. Meanwhile, here's our weather's easy. Okay, the weather in the east is easy. High pressure off the mid-Atlantic coast, west-southwest flow. It's for Saturday and Sunday. It's great weather, pretty much from Florida all the way up into Maine, with minimal shower or thunderstorm activity in the southern areas and hardly any at all in the north. And then here's your front for Monday with that short wave moving into New England. Maybe a few showers Monday evening, possibly a couple of thunderstorms in a few places. Jerry is getting picked up and brought right over Bermuda on this run, and it actually does strengthen it. So the GFS, at least on the picking up on the idea that once this East Coast trough pulls out, those upper air winds are going to relax, and that you could wind up seeing another hurricane moving over Bermuda a week after Umberto moved over Bermuda. That'd be something, and then northeast from there. A second front approaches late next week, and you see it here on the new GFS on Thursday. And I'll just outline it for you here. But there's a second front with that other short wave that's going to, the one that's going to try to help to pick Jerry up. Another one behind it that's going to weaken as it lifts up into northern New England and into eastern Canada. And then you're going to get that big upper low that's going to form off of Newfoundland. But this is a front for maybe late next week if it survives the trip across. The old run of the GFS with that, you can see it here, it sort of loses it. It's weak as it comes through the east, but it does. There is some semblance of a cold front that comes through here on Thursday, and then another high, and now we wait for the ridge to build in the east. And there's your snow, okay? There's your GFS snowfall into the Rockies and down into parts of the higher elevations of the highest elevations of the western half of Colorado, with a low that is in southeast Colorado, and you get those easterlies that go up into Wyoming. So there's your snow on the GFS with a low that's going to run up toward the Great Lakes. And now we're at October 1st. And there's another hurricane there that's coming off the coast of Mexico, moving south of the Baja Peninsula on the GFS. See, there's still a lot of stuff to look at and weather that's going to be going on from the standpoint. This is that time, we're getting into that time of year where you could have a snowstorm, not quite yet, but as we get into October, you can have those occasional situations where you could have a tropical storm or a hurricane, and at the same time have an early winter storm up in the Rockies. If you're going to see it, would see it up in that particular area. So back to the chat board, MI, and a big thank you to all of you who have taken time on your Friday night to be here. Appreciate it. Fridays there's usually a smaller audience because it's the end of the week and everybody's at happy hour and enjoying themselves and looking forward to the weekend, as am I. Just a couple of things I want to mention. A colleague of mine, those of you who are on Long Island or in the New York City area that might remember Bill Corbell on Rambling with Gambling back in the 80s and early 90s. Bill and I met in the late 80s. He needed somebody to work for him on WOR Radio 710 when he went on vacation. So he asked me to do it, and I said absolutely, and I had the wonderful thrill and privilege to be on the Rambling with Gambling show a number of times over the course of several years in the late 80s and early 90s. Bill wound up doing weather substitutions on News 12 when I took time off or when other folks were taking time off. And then when I left News 12 in 1995 to go to WPIX-TV in New York, a twist of fate, and Bill Corbell wound up at News 12 instead. And he's been there for 25 years. Bill's going to be retiring next Friday, and we wish him all the best. He's a great guy, a pilot. And a good forecaster. We've had a lot of fun at times over the years. I haven't seen or spoken to Bill in quite a while, and that's my fault. So, Mr. Corbell, if you're watching this after you're settled in your retirement, we have to get together. But congratulations to you on your retirement. I'm following because I will be done here at FiOS 1. My FiOS 1 News TV job ends on November 15th. So I will be pretty much retiring off the regular TV stuff, but I will be devoting myself full time to everything I'm doing online. So I'm not going away, okay? And maybe if Bill's in retirement, maybe we can get him on the show one day after he's all settled. Alfred Phillips in Wainwright, Alaska. Start building snow fences around your homes because it's major snow drifts. Well, they'll be coming soon enough, maybe to you first. But if the folks in the Northern Rockies, on the other hand, might see it just as quickly as you are, seeing it. Alfred Phillips is our northernmost viewer as he sits on the north slope of Alaska. Mark Glatfelter, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Same for Nick Cortez. Thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it. And a big thanks also to Paul Roman, Johnny Quest, William Uber, and the chairman Scott Briller, all Super Chat contributors tonight to my Friday night cigar and coffee or beer. Or maybe I'll save it for tomorrow and have a beer or two with it. I'm not a big beer drinker. I usually can only have one. That's all I can seem to handle. William Uber got down to 42 at Gabrisky Airport, and I also got down into the mid 40s this morning. Woke up with the two comforters on. I love it when it gets this cool. I really do. It makes it so much easier to sleep through the night than when you have that that warm, sticky feeling that you get trying to sleep even with the air conditioner on. It doesn't always, you have to get it down there pretty low in order to be comfortable. I like sleeping in that natural cool air. In the winter, I keep the thermostat at 62, and you sleep 62 with 3 or 4 blankets. You sleep deep sleeps, good solid 8 hours, and you wake up the next morning refreshed. Although I would caution that when you get out of bed, you kind of stick your foot out from under the covers, and your foot feels the cold air, and you just don't want to. You just don't want to. Who's going back to the disco days? Says Joyce Mack. Oh boy, that's back to late 70s and let's just say different clothes and different hair. I oftentimes look at pictures back in that period, and I think we all do that when we look at pictures from years ago, and you kind of say to yourself, what was I thinking? Erica Baker, you're watching a motorcycle chase in Oklahoma City. Well, watch it from the comfort of your home, from your couch and a television set, I hope, and not actually watching it while you're on the road. Doing over 100 miles an hour. That's insane. That's just crazy. John Courier, you don't want me to look at the nav gem. Oh, God. This is where there's certain models that I really don't bother to look at, and the nav gem is one of them. And the reason being that there's always one that shows you something that for the weather geeks out there get really excited over. So the nav gem, for what it's worth, I'm not going to show it to you, but I will describe it to you with Jerry. Northwest, and then turns it, the old nav gem just kind of meanders it westward, close to the, not quite to the northernmost Bahamas yet, but at about 28 and about 74 and a half or so. I really think that's pretty far-fetched. I want to just see what kind of an upper air it has. Well, I mean, basically what it says is, what it's doing on the upper air is that, this I will show because I think this is where we could learn something. And I really don't think that this is something that's viable right now, but it is something that you have to just kind of look at it and you sort of dismiss it. This shortwave coming down through the Great Lakes never really quite picks up Jerry, and then it's left behind to wait for the next trough that swings from the plain, from Lake Superior down to the Florida Panhandle, but even that one doesn't pick it up. I don't know. It's hard for me to envision that it's not going to get picked up by that lead shortwave. The only way it does is that if it's weaker. And let's look at the GFS on this. See, the GFS and the European both have a much stronger feature than the NavGem does. The NavGem is kind of this feature here is strong enough where those westerlies get down pretty far south and it lifts it up to the northeast. We might have enough of, at least it's a little bit jumpy, but we can look at the new GFS just to see for laughs what it's doing here. But that's Jerry afterwards. But the new GFS is, turns it north, and then northeast, right over Bermuda. It does kind of what Umberto was. They were showing Umberto doing with the another upper low offshore. It just kind of meanders there for a day or so, and then turns around and then moves to the east. Now, those of you watching up in Newfoundland, the model's done this a couple of times with that big trough that's coming into Newfoundland in the long range late next week. That's a big upper low that forms there. So I'm thinking that what you're seeing here, this 984 low that forms over Newfoundland, is not Jerry, but a non-tropical deep low that develops. This is Jerry here. This is a non-tropical deep low, and Jerry probably winds up getting absorbed by this. Something I guess we'll look at over the weekend if it keeps doing it. And the trough that's left behind by Jerry extends down into the central Atlantic here, and so therefore this next thing that comes off the African coast, again, right into that weakness that it turns up to the north and then to the northeast, and then it just races it away. Just real fast, just put this upper air, what we do have. So this is out at day 9. Deep low, deep trough off of Newfoundland. Westerly, the upper westerlies go all the way down to the Bahamas. And the winds in the upper atmosphere north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are from west to east. Big upper high building across the central Gulf states with a ridge pushing up the St. Lawrence Valley. So this this probably compares well to the last run. And it does. So that seems to be on course from this current run versus the last model run. So that was an interesting little exercise that we just did. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Let's go back to the chat board here. I have a little more time. Yes, it is your happy hour, Joyce Mack. And mine will be at 10 o'clock when my work day ends and I get to go home. Jess Harden, how many of our snow weenies? You can count me in. I am a snow weenie, but that's not professionally what I am, okay? So when it comes to looking at this stuff, those of you who have been watching me long enough know this. That snow weenie cap goes back in the drawer. So we take our forecasting seriously, and we don't ever do any wish casting. And Jess Harden, I know you're in Alabama, which is not exactly the right state you want to be for snow. I have no idea, okay? But look, if we get a deep trough, then deep troughing in the east, you might get some early cool fall weather heading down your way. But don't ask me about snow in the wintertime, because I can't really answer that. And as far as rain is concerned for you, I know that's becoming a bigger issue. You got to get that upper high to go away because while it's down there, the air is too stable, and it's just it's just not going to. You're not going to be able to see anything form from the standpoint of even just some scattered daytime thunderstorms. You got to get that upper high to go away. Jason Schaefer is on board tonight. We were always glad to see Jason Schaefer on board. Chuck Cardillo, who you were down in the 30s this morning, if I remember correctly from the message you left me on Patreon. Will I still do PIX from time to time? Jason Barry asked. I'm thinking that it will be rare because of staff changes that have been going on there. So they're effectively, I freelance there, so there seems to be less work. Going to be even less work for me to do, and I'm okay with that because I really want to be able. There's a lot of stuff that I want to do with regards to my YouTube channel and my websites and my social media stuff and my app and everything else that I can't do right now because I I'm working an 8-hour day and I'm spending 3 hours of my day in the car, but that's going to change. In fact, it's going to start to change next month because I'm going to be using some time off. So I will be able to spend a lot of that time working on my own stuff, which is really what I want to do. And, it's great that I get your support out of this, and I really, really do appreciate it greatly. I have a lot of ideas on where I'm going to take all this over the next 5 years or so, because the reality is that those of you who are my age, and I'm 60, and maybe you don't have to be that old to remember this, but if we go back, there was a time where the only place that you would get weather information was on a TV weathercast, and if you lived in the New York market, you really didn't get a whole lot of it. The markets away from New York City, particularly in places where weather was really important, got much more weather attention on their newscasts. But we are certainly moving away. We've completely moved away from that old television model. That's been the case for a number of years, and it's my belief that we're going to move away from it even more. So I think that there's value in creating an identity on my own, which is what I've been doing and what I'm going to continue to do, and hopefully grow my audience even more and grow my presence on the internet and social media more than what it is now. I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I want to work for myself. This is a world where and we all can do this. I mean, it's my show, and I can put the maps up that I want. I can talk about what I want when I want to talk about it. We could talk about what you want to talk about. Put the maps that you'd like to see. I try to accommodate. I don't have to answer to anybody anymore. So it's me and you. The audience is who I'm going to have to answer to. If they don't like my show, they're going to tell me by not showing up anymore. So that's the world that I want, and that's the world that I am going to be getting into. Well, the Joe Chaffee Weather Center, we've got the Joe Chaffee Show, we've got the Joe and Joe Weather Show when Joe Rayo's on board. So we're going to have all that stuff. We're going to do all sorts of different things. Some things we'll try and they'll work. Some things we'll try and they don't work, and that'll be also part of all the fun. But no, I will not, Joyce Mack, break out singing "I Want to Be Me." I promise you, I will not do that. And Howard, you're right. At the end of the day, I will be a much happier camper through all of this. Chad Matt Slayer, even in your Buffalo area, there's definitely become less need for TV Mets. Well, it really becomes a showcase of, look, the reality is in the television business, youth and beauty, okay, of which I don't know if I ever had the beauty part of it. If I had definitely I had the youth part of it, but I don't have that anymore, and that is the reality, and that's who gets hired for jobs. I'm not saying that out of any kind of sense of bitterness, but it's the reality, and the reality also is that those people hired today will also have to face the same thing 10 years from now, 15 years from now. That's just the way it goes, and this is why I'd rather be doing what I'm doing here, and doing websites and doing my websites and writing about the weather and giving you my opinion about what's going to be happening weather-wise on my platform, on my own show. But it won't be the Tonight Show starring Joe Chaffee, Chuck Cardillo. Okay, I don't think that it's going to be quite like that. When am I going to cook some chili? I don't know about chili, Shelly Man Studios, but once I get, there's a few other things that are going on personally, but once that happens, where I'm settled a little bit, we'll maybe do a little bit of cooking when it's appropriate. I'll do some ribs and meatballs and roasts and turkeys and all the stuff that I like to cook I'll bring out my Lodge cast iron skillet. And by the way, if you cook, you got to have a cast iron skillet. I have a 15-inch diameter Lodge, Lodge, cast iron skillet. It is so amazing how food tastes when you cook in a cast iron skillet, and that's a high quality. That is definitely a high quality item. So I do a lot of stuff with the cast iron skillet. And one of these days, I will definitely show you a few things, but not today. Time to go. Okay, time to go. Thanks for being here. So the weekend schedule, which is always a bit tough, mainly because I get so wrapped up in other stuff and resting that then I always, then I'm tempted to take a break and skip the live stream. So I'll tell you what, tomorrow, if Jerry doesn't look like it's going to be bothering anybody tomorrow, and if there's nothing crazy going on, I might skip the live stream. But if I don't skip it, I will certainly notify you by scheduling it early. Weather in 5, that we will have tomorrow morning. So we will give you a morning update on the goings-on during the overnight and what we can expect for the next 5 days. And then we'll come back on Sunday, and maybe Sunday I will do a live stream. So just look ahead. If you got your notifications turned on, they will tell you. And by the way, remember, if you're not getting your YouTube notifications, you got to make sure that first of all that you're logged into your YouTube account and you don't log off. Also, if you are on the YouTube app on your phone, make sure that the notifications on the YouTube app are turned on. Don't log off the app, and make sure that your phone notifications are turned on, because if you have any one of those things turned off, you're going to have a problem. Now, Patreon members, you get notified every day of when the live streams are coming, usually a couple of hours before. And I just put the link up for those of you who are, really want to get into a more intensive weather experience and have more one-on-one with me, which includes, you can message me anytime. I respond to all the comments that are put up, or most of the comments that I put up on my Patreon platform with respect to my posts. And if you need some one-on-one, that's the place to go. I've got a link up on there. It's a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month for starters. If you really need forecasting on a regular basis, some help with things, there are some higher tiers that you can look at. So it's on there. Again, just $2 a month. And a number of you that are on here on a nightly basis are part of the Patreon platform. And you have given it good reviews, and I really, really do appreciate that. And just one other way, as we finish off another week here, there is one other way, if you would like, and if you would choose to, you're certainly not obligated. I do have a link on Amazon that if you use it to do your shopping, you just use the search bar on there and buy whatever you want. You don't have to buy what's on there, but if you do and you use this link, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin to also get me maybe a cigar and a fishing lure every once in a while. And we're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So thanks very much for being here. Jess Harden, I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much for asking. Once again, for tonight, many thanks to Mark Glatfelter, Nick Cortez, Paul Roman, Johnny Quest, William Uber, and Scott Briller, the chairman himself, all hitting Super Chat tonight, and a big thank you from me for that. Have a great evening. Have a safe weekend. Last weekend of summer. Autumn arrives Monday, and we will be right here to welcome it in, but not live because it comes at 4 in the morning, and I'm not getting up for that. Good night.